Council meeting of May 22nd, 2017. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start our meeting with announcements. Mr. Liverman, any announcements this evening?
Just the, I mentioned last time in regard to the marijuana forum that Corner House and Princeton Police and the school system, Princeton Board of Education, and PATA, Princeton Alcohol and Drug Alliance, will be having on the 24th of this month, and I believe that's Wednesday at 7 o'clock at John Witherspoon School. Everyone is invited. It's going to be a great program, very informative, and I'm just letting everyone know. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, I just point out that what I believe to be one of the final of the Bike to Work Month events will be tomorrow. It's Bike and Walk School Day at Riverside School, and I'll be joining several members of the Bike Advisory Committee and walking and biking to Riverside. So hope to see you out there, rain or shine.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Bike Committee for all their work in advertising the events last week. They're really terrific. There were some really wonderful events over the weekend. The bike rodeo, I thank the police for always making that a really great event. And then the Cyclovia, or Cyclovia, depending on... Cyclovia. I knew one of them was right, which was yesterday. Beautiful weather on Quaker Road, and there was, I think, the best turnout we've ever had for that. So please extend our thanks. And then I had a couple other announcements. One is that the Spirit of Princeton Memorial Day Parade is this Saturday, going down Nassau Street starting at 10, and that's always a really wonderful community event, whether you want to march or observe. And also wanted to announce that the town is starting to more heavily use seamless docks for permits, so you can now fill out the permits and submit them online and make your payments online. And there's over a dozen forms that are up there now, and the town's going to be continuing to work to put up more. And I want to thank Access Princeton and Chris Iliff in particular for getting those up and running. And we've gotten some great initial feedback so far. So it's all part of an effort to make government a little less cumbersome and a little easier to use for residents and businesses. Are there any staff announcements? Yep, Ms. Stockton.
Thank you. We have 2 items related to parking. There's 9 days left for residents to participate in the parking survey. You can find the survey at www.surveymonkey.com/r/Princeton parking. We've received over 1,500 survey responses so far, but we welcome many more. So please, you can put in many different answers as to if you're an employee, a resident, or somebody that comes to shop, and then it will take you to different questions in the survey. And then the second item related to that is we have another parking meeting scheduled for June 14th. From 5:30 to 6:30, there will be an open house where people can come and take a look at the information that the consultant has gathered. And then at 6:30, there will be a formal presentation given on the results as well as some potential solutions for our parking situations in town.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, and now We'll move on to comments from the public that are not already on the agenda, and I'm going to go off the sign-up sheet. Some of you have signed up for ordinance public hearings tonight, so we'll wait till that part of the meeting. But I will call up Yuritsa Perez. Can you just make sure you're speaking right up close to the mic? And just to make sure it's on, you have to get close.
Good evening. Okay. Sorry. First of all, thank you very much for all your efforts and for hosting these meetings to allow the public to come and express their needs. My name is Yuritsa Perez, and this is Daniel Cadet. We're part of the World Mission Society Church of God. The Church of God was established in 1964, and since then it has spread to 175 different countries and consists of more than 2.7 million registered members. So we're part of the Central Jersey location of the Church of God, which is one of 2,700 churches all over the world. And part of our goal is that following the example of God the Father and God the Mother in the Bible, we strive to serve and help our communities through volunteer works, such as visits to the elderly, blood drives, and cleanups. Then many of us, we participate in worldwide volunteer works, and we're known and have been commended for our efforts. We recently received the Queen's Award, which we're really excited about, and we have also received awards from our previous president, Barack Obama, the Call to Service Award. And so even here in the past, we have participated in the Marquand's cleanup, which is located very closely. And so because we really enjoyed working with you in the past, we would like to know what else we can do to help the Princeton community and continue our relationship with the town. So really, we just wanted to come out and express that we wanted to help you serve the community even more, and also to know what else we can do for the Princeton community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your help with Marquand Park. I know that I saw the pictures from the cleanup, and it was pretty incredible. So we're very grateful, and I'm sure we can think of some projects.
Awesome.
And I think I have your contact information, but if you have a card, if you want to leave it with Mr. DeShield, and then he can make sure that Recreation Department and other departments that might have need for volunteers can reach out to you with projects.
Okay,
so thank you. We
very
really
much.
appreciate it.
Good evening. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak for about anything that's not already on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to our presentation for this evening. And this is a presentation about a new technology that's going to be piloted on a small scale here in Princeton for smart parking meters. And I'll turn it over to Arash.
Let me just make sure this is at the right height. Hello. Okay. Hi. Well, thank you so much again for having us here today, and it was great meeting you all last. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Councilman Quinn yet, but hopefully you all remember what we do. I'm just going to give you a quick refresher of what the technology is about and what we do.
Before you start, we're still getting up to speed on our screens. I don't think we have it. We don't have it on our screens, do we? Or, oh, okay, now we do.
Can you see it? All right, let's continue. All right. Imagine if parking wasn't such a painful experience. Yeah. If you didn't have to worry about finding a spot, having the correct payment, or getting a ticket if not back on time. Imagine a solution where you had a parking spot waiting for you wherever you went, with your name on it, and the payments took care of themselves. Today, the problem today is the outdated technology, unfortunately. Even the latest parking solutions are still coin boxes, with very little information about their surroundings. They just take fancier coins. At Possumus, we are building a truly on-demand approach to parking. Using smart sensors and AI, Our patent-pending parking meters can reliably tell in real time and with incredible accuracy if a spot is occupied. There are colored beacons on the meters that effectively broadcast the status of the spot to the passing motorists. You pair this with our mobile applications and the cloud-based backend, and the possibilities are endless. This is how it works. The beacon, imagine the beacon is flashing green. That means that the meter is online and accepting customers. When it detects a vehicle, it starts flashing red. It means it's expecting a form of payment. Now you could use any type of card, smart card, bank card, just flash in front of the meter. Or ideally, you would use the apps that we're building. Or if you forget both your wallet and your phone, you could always use a tag that you keep in your car. Say we use the app to log in, the beacon turns green. That means you've successfully logged in. Now you can go do your business, shopping, anything you want to do, and all you have to do to end a transaction is get back into your car and drive away. Now the system knows that the spot is vacant again, it stops the timer and only charges you for the amount of time that you were parked there. And we can sort of completely automate this process through AI and computer vision. As for the values that we bring to the township and the motorists, instead of driving round and round looking for a spot, you just pull up the app and see all the available spots nearby. Now, the idea here is that once you select a spot, the system can actually take that spot offline. So for, say, 2 minutes, 3 minutes for you to get there, that spot is actually yours. So it's a very efficient way of routing traffic around, cutting down on unnecessary travel. On top of streamlining the parking, there are many additional sources of value and revenue that we bring to the cities and motorists. The real-time analytics that is generated, I know you're in the middle of doing a parking study, so imagine if you had this kind of system in place, everything would have been much easier. So the analytics is incredibly useful for municipalities, allowing them to optimize their pricing models and adjust rates based on supply and demand. Bulk purchases, you could think of this as sporting events, season tickets for trains. You could just buy parking credit in bulk. In terms of security, I know we have Chief Sutter here, so we're building this backend, this command center that you guys will get a live feed to it, and we'll just hand it over to you. If a car is stolen, the user is notified immediately, so they can have a panic button on their app, send you a text information with all the information about the make and model of the car and what happened. There is no more driving in circles looking for parking. That means less pollution, more sustainable future. There is no cash in the meters. We decided to make this cashless. That means that the meters have no moving parts, and they don't have to be built like safety deposit boxes. So this means we could make them out of composite-like plastics and make them a lot cheaper and almost completely maintenance-free. They're just completely like a glorified webcam. However, the largest potential is for the smart cities or the sort of emerging technologies such as autonomous vehicles, IoTs. The real value of an autonomous vehicle is that when you arrive at your destination, you want it to go and park itself instead of going all the way back home and come back pick you up. With the existing technology, that is just not possible. Our meters would in real time, will talk to the smart cars and direct them to the tight spots, take payments, take care of everything. In terms of, so now that this brings us to the Princeton pilot, this is what we sort of talked about last September. We were here, and the proposal was to have these meters on the streets of Princeton at a very limited sort of capacity, and 5 locations in Princeton downtown. And based on the feedback we received both from the council and the merchants, we decided that it's best to postpone it to after the Nelson Nygaard study, so we get all the feedback from them and put it sometime in the summer. Working with the public works and the merchants, we have now finalized 5 locations. These would be in Palmer Square. One of them would be sort of on Nassau Street, just outside PNC. One would be on Spring Street, another one again on Nassau Street outside CVS, and a final one would be the location on Nassau Street just opposite Blue Point Grill. And the plan is, so these would fulfill, the requirements would be at least one of, or both of the spots would be not adjacent to any other spots. That was the requirement we got. And also these have to be short-term locations, for example, 30 minutes to 2 hours where there's a lot of parking turnover, because that would give us a lot more feedback. And also they have to be a bit spread out so we can test the routing algorithms. Now, in terms of, so the plan is to actually start with one location, hopefully the Palmer Square location, and we have that for running for 2 to 3 weeks, ironing out any problems that they might have, and then we sort of expand to the next locations as we build up capacity. So in terms of logistics, we coordinated with Public Works in Diana, and we decided to make them as visible as possible, that these spots are designated for the pilot. We would add some road markings, temporary road markings to the spots, just saying permit only, and then an identification number, which would also show up on the app. In terms of the logistics of changing the meters, so this would be very easy. Basically the meter head comes off. Our meters, the base is hollow, the pole stays in the ground, and our meters just slide over it and affixes to the pole. So there's no digging involved, nothing. And our meters are completely off-grid, wirelessly powered, and there's no wiring, nothing involved. In terms of marketing, so we have a dedicated member. Romina Gimenez is with me tonight, and she's the latest member to join the team, and she will be in charge of the business development and marketing. We have talked to the PMA, sort of kept them involved in the process of development. In addition to that, we are also going around actually talking to individual merchants, and this is sort of the highlighted ones are the merchants that we've reached out to, and we're planning to individually go to each and every one of them and tell them about the pilot. At this point, as you know, we have a press release coming up telling people formally about the pilot, and our website is open to take sign up users. We have already about 250 people who signed up for the pilot, and we're going to keep progressing, make a pool of candidates that we're going to be adding to the sort of representative sample that would be using the pilot. We would not be charging anybody. We'll give them funny money, as we discussed, to go and spend and then give us feedback. And as they run out of money, then more people will get added to the active user list. So with that, I'd like to thank you again and throw it back to you for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Liverman?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I really love this. You know, it's bringing us into the future here.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. The question, I have two questions. One is, you mentioned you have 250 people that have signed up so far. Are they from the Princeton area or from out of town or the state of New Jersey, or where are they?
We've had very limited exposure so far. Our exposure was mostly through the entrepreneurship events that we went through close to New Jersey and through Princeton, and also the merchants. So everybody who's heard it locally.
Okay.
Of course, we're gonna build up this user list and then send them a demographic survey. Say, hey, where are you? Are you going to be in Princeton? How often do you use the service? How often do you come to Princeton Township? So we're going to make sure that these guys are actually in the study and very close to the Princeton area and using the spots regularly.
Okay. The other question, thank you so much. The other question is, you mentioned that you can reserve it, and you could be 5 minutes away or 6 minutes away or so forth.
Very on demand. So
Very on
2
demand.
to 3 minutes.
Oh, 2 to
Very
3
close,
minutes.
yeah.
Now, are you paying for those 2 to 3 minutes, or how does that work?
So
with the meter on hold?
That is something we have to iron out. So I know that the township right now has a 10-minute
We have a 10-minute
courtesy
grace
at the
period.
very end.
Yes.
So we can bring it to the very beginning, and the way we thought of it is that because they might get stuck in traffic, or they might actually cancel their reservation as they're en route to getting to the spots. We won't start charging until they arrive at the spot and successfully log into the meter. and that's where the timer starts. But of course, we can enforce, we can see how long they're taking. If they're taking too long, we would send them a notification saying, hey, are you still interested in the spot? Or if you want another spot, we could sort of route you to another spot. But yeah, as I said, this is something we have to iron out.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Krummeller?
Two questions. Are you having both Android and, I mean, are you doing all three
Android and iOS at this point.
and not Windows phones?
Not, no.
I don't know how many
It's-
people,
it's
I
on
don't
the
know how
to-do
many
list.
people have those, but some
On
people
the to-do
do.
list. Yes, so iPhone seems to be the most popular one, so iOS, about 70% market share, and then Android we found about 25 to 20%. And
Oh,
then
is that all?
Windows phones are a little sort of underrepresented.
The other, I was thinking about, are you going to have a voice, are you activated system so that people can just say into their phones, find me a parking spot? Because driving
Absolutely.
along, it's going to be hard to look at
Yes,
your phone.
absolutely. So there are three ways to park. One is to just see a flashing green light and pull in. The other one is when you're close to your destination, you pull up the app and look at it. No, well, you have to pull over. You don't have to be driving. Yes. The third way is you're far away from your destination. You select your destination, and as you come in, the app will take over and actually pick a spot and take you to the spot. But for the second way, this is on your to-do list. It could, as you said, voice command. So this would be just as easy as saying, "Hey Siri, park me," for example.
I have a question. So how are you going to be communicating this to the public? I mean, everybody here knows about it now,
Yes.
and people watching on TV, but if people want to sign up, how is that word going to get out?
So we have a website set up now after we had the discussion last year. So, and also the press release. This is hopefully going to all the local publications here and National Wire later on as we publicize the study more locally. Hopefully this would get people to notice. And also we're going around talking to merchants. We're going to be going to the market fair. There is the what was this you were mentioning? The farmers market, yes. So that's a good location, just going to farmers market. So just going to the town and talking to people, basically going around telling them about the study, word of mouth. Make sure everybody hears about it.
And then the other question I had is, are you expecting the town to do enforcement in terms of if there's people parking who aren't in the study, or how is that working?
We had this ironed out last year. We thought that this would be treated as. Do you want to take this? Sure.
This would be treated similar to like when there's meter bags on the meters. And so the police would have the ability to park if it's somebody that's not part of the study group. I'm sorry, the police would have the ability to enforce anybody that's parked in those spots that aren't part of the study group.
So is there going to be a sticker, or like how are the police supposed to know who's in it and who's not in it?
We can notify them. We have real-time monitoring, so if somebody parks there that they're not supposed to, we can notify them.
Okay.
Ideally, we don't want to ticket anybody.
Right.
Hopefully, we'd be happy to just give them a warning saying, "Hey, don't do this," or just go online and sign up, and then you could park here for free.
Okay.
Are you going to have signs at each meter that explain this?
On the meter, there's going to be
Yeah.
some literature. Yes.
Okay. And then just so I think everybody understands too, your group is paying for the parking meter revenue that the town normally would have collected. So
That is correct, yes.
it's free for the participants in the survey, but it's your company is sponsoring it, not the
Absolutely.
municipality.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Just like to, not a question as much as a comment, that I did see your presentation the first time you were at council, and I was sitting in the back row. And I would like to follow up with you. This is very exciting. This is 2 meetings in a row that we've received sort of cutting-edge tech presentations that are developed here in Princeton, and it's very exciting to see. And you just got 2 more subscribers, I think, while we were visiting your website. I noticed Jenny did,
And so did I. And I just did
So,
too. Tim, I
I think in this town, it's like, you have me at free parking,
Yes.
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, like 6
So
people tonight.
I don't know whether we're conflicted in that. I asked the municipal attorney whether we can participate. So anyway, no, it's very exciting, and I
Thank you
would
so
like to
much.
follow up with you and have a meeting prior to this going live.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And we'd love to have you back too, just to give us a summary at the end of the summer, how it
Sure.
went and what you see as the future for your technology and next steps.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sure. Here, come on up.
I'm also really curious about enforcement, not for people outside of the study, for people in the study who think they're getting free parking, but they go over the 2-hour limit or over the 30-minute limit. What's going to happen to them?
So ideally, you would be receiving notifications on the apps that remind you of the parking limits. Ideally, we're not going to be ticketing anybody. So we're off the record.
So-
we're just going to give you a warning. So if you keep repeating the offense, we might kick you off the study, but we're not going to ticket.
Okay. But if the pilot gets adopted as a solution in town, tell about how the ticketing happens. I mean, is that relying on, are we going to fire our meter people and it's going to all be automatic, or?
That will be up to the township to decide. I don't know.
Yeah,
But you do know that you can also charge more.
But-
You can charge for the
So-
3 hours, 4 hours. You can
Yes,
charge.
we wanted to actually
the-
get rid
the
of
person.
this
You can
this
charge in the hours as
fee
you,
that happened. It's this fine that happens at the end of the parking. We could actually turn it into a progressive pricing. So as you park more, it becomes prohibitively more expensive for you to park. So
Yeah.
that's one way of getting around this limit.
And also, just in response to David's question, I think just in setting this up, I just want to be clear, too, that this is a pilot of the technology, but probably the next step in terms of scaling it would not be in a place like Princeton. So in terms of implementing something like this townwide in Princeton, that's still a ways away. And I think that the technology has to probably go through
Yes,
a
we're
little
still
bit more.
a year or so away from a couple of R&D steps before we can implement it in real time.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now we come to reports, and I'd like to invite up the chief for the March 2017 police report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, make an announcement on a new partnership that the department has formed that was facilitated through Corner House. And the partnership is with the Community Addiction Recovery Effort, Community Advocates of America, Recovery Advocates of America. And this program is called the CARE Program. So you may have heard about it it was starting to take off in some other local communities. And we met through Corner House with the architects of the program. We think it's a great thing for us here. Basically, this whole effort is based on the research and the facts that people suffering with addiction often come in contact with the police. And often those contacts are when these people are really hitting a point in their disease where they're receptive to help. And we have acknowledged here in Princeton, we've acknowledged this nationally, that we are not, as law enforcement, arresting ourselves out of this addiction problem. By arresting someone, we understand there's violations of law and the person has to deal with those ramifications, but we're not helping the disease. This, we feel, is going to help the person that's suffering with the disease. And it's a very simple but very important process. Basically, what this is going to do is allow an officer, when they make contact in any way, shape, or form with a person that's suffering from addiction of any kind, it'll allow us to offer them at that point help. And we have documents and training. We'll have training from these advocates that will allow us to put them in touch with professional counselors and get them access to immediate treatment. And that includes a bed at a recovery center. So this is so important for that revolving door that we do encounter in law enforcement, and the frustration that we encounter when we're dealing with people that are suffering from addiction, and it's just a revolving door of justice where they're not getting that help. So in our meeting, we were very, I guess, energetic, and we're confident that this could work here. And they, the Recovery Advocates of America, will maintain all the statistics, all the data. They will follow up continuously with the person, whether they take advantage of it or not, and continually following up, trying to get this person help as they go down that path to recovery. So we were really excited. I think that there's a training meeting coming up with Mercer County Prosecutor's offices getting involved in this. So I think it's something, I'm kind of hoping it's something that becomes mandated countywide, that everybody starts to have to get involved in. It's really, from what I got from our meeting, there's no downside from a public safety standpoint, from a public health standpoint. It's simply an officer picking up a phone with a hotline number, and they guaranteed us response within 30 minutes of our phone call. So before that person leaves, they will at least, if they don't take full advantage of entering a recovery center, they will at least have a number, a name, a face, and hopefully a friend to kind of mentor them should they take advantage of it in the future. That's really, it's a simple concept which really attracted me to it. There's nothing intricate. It's a very simple, straightforward type of process aimed at combating this national epidemic locally. So it's like we're doing our small part for people that we encounter. And if I didn't say this earlier, this encounters any type of contact that we may have. It doesn't necessarily have to be law enforcement related. It could be medical related. It could be somebody that walks in to file a report that we enter in a conversation and find out that the person's in need of help. So we'll be doing a press release on it shortly, probably, hopefully this week, and it'll be initiated this week as well. And with that, I can take any questions on the statistical reports that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Terrific job as usual. I just want to thank the police department for 2 weekends in a row being out there with long overtime and a lot of work. We had what do we have? The first one was we had community university, which was a big one. Then we had marathons in town, the Pacers, and it's just great to have the police out there. You're doing a fine job. Question I have, last year in May 2016, that was the largest month for service calls. It was 4,284. And I didn't have the stats on 2015, but if I'm remembering correctly, it seems like May is like the largest time for service calls for some reason. Is there a reason, do you know?
I don't think there's a specific, to answer your question, I guess there are specific reasons. I think in around commencement time at the different institutions, a lot of traffic, more car accidents, more motor vehicle type stops, more encounters, and more general calls. The more people that come in,
The more
general calls we tend to get.
the reunions.
Yeah, and we won't forget that as well. Yes. So I think I would definitely attribute it to the more activity going on in town at that time.
And the second and the last area is I mentioned the marijuana forum that we're having on the 24th, and I see that the most arrests that we've done are in that area for marijuana, or the you call them CDS.
Yeah, we are. I think trending. My general, and I don't have the statistics. I have this month's statistics as compared to last year. But my general perception in reviewing the reports every day is that we are having more contacts, marijuana related. And it's also not necessarily related. Years past, you could have kind of expected coming from more of a certain age group, people experimenting and such, but now it doesn't seem to necessarily be that way. These are my general perceptions that I'm making. So I think, this forum comes at a great time, and I'm really thinking that it's going to raise awareness.
Good. Thank you.
Well, this is a little bit of a follow-up, kind of. I'm really proud of our department for making public the statistics on race for police stops. And I was looking at the juvenile report, and there were 3 middle school kids who apparently had marijuana, and I was wondering if we keep statistics on race and juveniles,
We do.
and if maybe we could make that public too. Not any individual numbers, but I think it would be reassuring, because one of the big concerns people have especially about marijuana laws, is that they sometimes disproportionately affect African Americans for whatever reason. And, like these kids who now have a record,
It's definitely statistics that we keep. Off the top of my head, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
Juvenile records are highly protected, but in the aggregate,
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with it.
Okay.
I'll just research it to make sure, but I
Okay.
don't see a problem with it.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, will all of our patrol officers be trained in the program that you talked about, the recovery program?
Yes, we've actually already started that process. We've issued an internal policy, and they will all be trained. We're actually sending several officers it's June 6th, actually, to a training at the county level, where Recovery Advocates of America will be training our officers, kind of train the trainer. And the greatest part about it, as I said earlier, is that it's so simplistic in its approach that it's really a matter, for lack of a better word, it's like a marketing strategy to try to really convince this person from more of a counselor type approach that it's in their best interest to take advantage of it. The other thing, since we brought this up again, I forgot to mention, is that this shouldn't be misconstrued that and we make this very clear to people, that this is really separate from any legal ramifications that take place. So, if it's a law enforcement encounter where there was an arrest, the person may still have to face those issues. This is separate, but the great part about, at least the way we do it a lot here in Princeton, is once a person has entered a recovery program and is working at recovery, we really try to advocate for that person through the judicial system and show that as a very positive thing, and that the person's reformed and is trying. So it does work to their benefit as they progress through the system, but it is something separate from the law enforcement action. But there will be definitely training, repetitive training given.
One further question along the same lines. Is this program aimed primarily at opioid addiction, or is it addiction in general?
That's a great question, and that's the first question I asked. And the great answer is it's aimed at addiction in general. It could be any type of addiction, but I guess the overwhelming amount of addiction that we are seeing right now is opioid. So that's, I think, the genesis of the program, but we can use it for any type of addiction.
And then moving away from that topic, the U.S. Attorney General announced a policy in terms of charging individuals who are arrested for a crime with the highest possible offense that they can identify associated with that crime. In other words, moving up the ladder of offense rather than down the ladder of offense in terms of charging. Does that affect us locally in any way, or is that only for the U.S. attorneys rather than state and local?
That's a great question. Often when statements are made at the national level, it starts to kind of conflate everything, and it's a great question. So to answer your question directly, no. We are covered by state law with regards to that, and the new bail reform laws that were just actually enacted kind of cover all those things very specifically. So there's a lot of, especially with more serious crimes, there's a lot of back and forth between the officer and the prosecutor's office, or the person that'll actually be prosecuting the case. So there's a lot of discretion that enters into charging, and often that's related to the proofs of the crime being alleged. So especially when the prosecutor's office is involved, they're looking at it more from a prosecutorial standpoint, where charging the most serious offense isn't either fair or makes sense. So I'm really confident that at our level, that really has never been the case here locally, and we always charge and continue to charge based on the proofs that can be established, both from a probable cause standpoint at our level, and now at the prosecutor's office looking at it from a prosecutorial standpoint.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Quinn?
Yes, Mr. Miller asked my question about the rise in opioid use, but I think it might be useful for me as new on council to, could you go over the protocol for if a student in one of the public schools is caught possessing CDS? Do the schools have any sort of discretion whether they call the police, or is it a matter of course?
That's a great question. So that's actually covered in the memorandum of agreement, the state memorandum of agreement between law enforcement and educators. It's a very thick memorandum that
I've read it.
We sign every year. So as a matter of course, they do notify us when there is notify the police department when there's a matter of narcotic possession in the schools. Again, the thing that's, so let's look at it from two standpoints. What do we do, and why, and what's the process? So the whole juvenile justice process is aimed at reform and intervention, right, and rehabilitation. So normally we will we'll respond. Usually we go to a school with plainclothes officers as part of our agreements as to not make if we can, if they're available. And parents are already notified. And very simply, the person is, depending on the age of the student also matters. 14 and under are treated completely different, or largely different than 14 to 17, and what the processing is. And once they're engaged with us, it becomes a complete process of getting them resources for rehabilitation. We take that very seriously, regardless of the amount of interactions they have with narcotics with us. The first step we want to do is get them some type of testing mandated by the court usually, or it can be part of a station house adjustment agreement where they agree we won't charge through the court system, and they will go and at least see someone to get evaluated. And we use Corner House extensively with this. And I know Mr. Liverman knows how we work with Corner House. We work with juveniles in Corner House with this all the time, and it's highly successful. So the purpose is absolutely not prosecution, but to get intervention in there as quickly as possible, because we know the longer this research shows, the longer this goes untreated with no type of intervention at all, the numbers of addiction are, it's not a good outlook.
And the independent schools in town,
Yes.
are you asked to respond similarly?
We are asked to respond similarly. We meet with them regularly as well. In our strategic plan, there was an idea that was referred to as a school huddle, I don't know if you might remember that. And that's where our community, our Safe Neighborhoods unit, at least once a year, usually more, sit down with the administrators from each and every school and go over this exact type of thing. Okay, what are we going to do when these types of things happen? How are we going to handle them? How are we going to work together for the benefit of the child? And it's totally not, again, just to reiterate, not an enforcement type of action. There are times where it's repetitive and all the steps have been taken to intervene and they're not working, where we have to then refer it to the judicial system. But even at that level, it just becomes more mandated, where the court comes in and says, okay, you have to now attend this, and the court's going to oversee it. So everything is aimed at getting involved in the child's kind of welfare.
Thanks, Chief. And it was good to see you out at Johnson Park at the Bike and Walk
Lots
to
of
School
fun.
Day. So
Thank you.
I have a question just because it's been Bike Week.
Yeah.
And I guess it's Bike Month. So can you just tell us again about the bike patrol
Sure.
for the police, and when does that get rolled out, and what's the point of it, and how many officers are involved?
Sure. So this is the time of year where we're looking at that to go kind of full force, and it really is our Safe Neighborhoods unit are the primary members of that. But we also, when our numbers on our patrol squads are at full strength, we try to also assign officers that are trained in bike patrol, which we have many, also get out of the cars and get on the bike. So the whole purpose is really just us being out and approachable. And the same type of thing with foot patrol. When we're in the car, driving around, we're not approachable. When we're out on a bike, walking, people are more likely to approach us. We do a lot of bike safety things with children at this time of year. And, the presence of the officer on a bike really just generates conversation. And a lot of people point at, look, the officer on a bike. Years ago, when I did it, many years ago, it was really new. And it was, people were startled to see it. Nowadays, it's become more common and people have grown to expect it. So it's a whole different kind of dynamic there. But we will be out there. You will see us, and we'll, hopefully people will come up and talk to us.
Great. All right, thank you. Any other questions for the chief?
I just want to ask, do we still give away a slice of pizza or
Yes.
something? And how does that work, the slice of pizza?
It's been a huge success with, it was vouchers for ice cream and pizza, slices of pizza, where we partnered with local establishments, and our officers would approach, a young person on a bicycle that was obeying the traffic laws, usually a helmet or lights on the bike or whatever the case may be, and, kind of get their attention, and then give them a voucher for a free slice of pizza or ice cream for obeying
That's
the
nice.
traffic. Kind of the opposite of getting a traffic ticket. So
That's
it
nice.
reinforces good behaviors, and it's been kids really love it. It's just generated great interaction, and we'll be doing that again.
Well, we should do it. We should do it with adults driving and give them maybe
Yes.
veal parmesan dinner or something. Thank you.
All right, thanks, chief.
Kind of the reverse of click it or ticket, right?
All right, so we'll continue with reports. Mr. Liverman, do you have any reports?
No, I know our police commissioner's not here, and she may have wanted the chief to mention the the officers that rode to was it Washington, Chief Sutter? Our bicycles that rode to Washington for the. I know she'll probably want to mention that.
Yes, for excuse me, for National Law Enforcement Memorial Week, we had several officers that rode bicycles with a group of, I guess, several thousand from around the country. But our chapter left from Mercer County Community College and rode to Washington, D.C., and we rode for every person that's in the ride, every officer that's in the ride rides for a fallen officer. So we rode in honor of our fallen officers, as well as Officer David Hoffer, who was actually an officer in Texas, but his parents lived live in Princeton currently, and he was slain last year in Texas. So we also rode in his honor, and I gave some remarks at the opening ceremony for Walter Harris, our fallen officers here in Princeton. So it was definitely a moving experience, and it was great camaraderie with the officers and for a good cause.
Well, thank you. The other thing I read before I came in, I think this week, if I'm not mistaken, or this month, is National EMS Week. I had no clue. And I just read it like an hour ago or something. So we just want to thank our EMS crew, Princeton PFAS, for all the work that they've done and continue to do in Princeton.
Thanks, Lance. Mr. Miller, any reports? Ms. Kremler, any reports? Mr. Quinn, any reports? Okay. I don't have any reports this meeting either. All right. So are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton?
I just have one report. New Jersey American Water Company will be holding a neighborhood meeting on May 31st in the community room next door to present a project on Route 27 from Harrison Street to Snowden Lane, replacing the water main and the services. They will be notifying all of the residents as it's their project. Their contractor, CRJ Contracting, will be available at the meeting, and they will discuss the schedule. It's currently scheduled for night work. That was the permit they received from State Department of Transportation, night work from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. We have an internal pre-construction meeting with them on Wednesday this week to get more details about it, and I can pass that on to Mark and he can distribute it to you. But May 31st at 7 o'clock p.m. in the community room will be the neighborhood meeting.
Great, thank you. Any other reports? Okay. Then we'll move on to ordinance public hearings. The first ordinance public hearing tonight is 2017-19, an ordinance amending Chapter 34 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, concerning sewer connection fees. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance before I open up the public hearing? Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-20, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton accepting Title 39 jurisdiction over the Griggs Corner parking yard and amending Chapter 19, Article 11, parking of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Any questions from council before we open up the public hearing?
No, I just wanted to state, just for the public that's looking in, these meters, they don't accept nickels, they don't accept dimes, and there's also not a 10-minute grace period at the end. So just, there'll be a signage so that you can see that, but I'm just noting for you in regard to the meters in this yard.
Right, because
Thank
it's
you.
not a public, this is not a public lot. It's owned and operated by Palmer Square.
Which is a change from how it used to be.
I'd like to point out that the memo explaining this makes it clear that the owner of the lot retains the revenue from the meters. The municipality retains the fines that are levied if the parking regulations are not obeyed. And I've been opposed to this from the very beginning. I remain opposed to it. I think that basically the person who violates the law is not going to look at this and say, well, these meters are non-standard, and they're going to look at it and say, I have to pay a fine to the municipality. And it's the municipality that is causing this problem, not the owner of the lot. And I think that it's an unfortunate situation because if there are parking problems there, they're going to come to roost in our court, not in the office of Palmer Square Incorporated or whoever operates the lot for Palmer Square Incorporated. And as far as I'm concerned, there's very little gain to the municipality from this arrangement.
Okay, is there anyone, Ms. Krumiller?
Well, I just want to, we had this discussion, and I think that the majority, but I want to hear from everyone else, feels that the advantage of having that parking available to the public, I mean, I agree, especially because I didn't know that the meters didn't take nickels and dimes. I knew that they didn't have a grace period. But actually, I guess what I want to say is I hope that the signage is really clear, because I share your concerns, Bernie, about it, but I do think that the benefit of having the parking available is a benefit to the public, and we couldn't work out a lease agreement anymore, and so the only alternative was for them to do some kind of other parking that would be less convenient and for the public. So I am going to vote for it, but I do want to ask that we check to make sure that it's very clear, maybe on each meter and with a sign, that the meters don't take dimes and there's no grace period, and nickels. I think that's weird.
Okay. I would like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? Mr. Cohen?
I probably could have gotten this information if I had reviewed the the attached information before the meeting, but can someone just explain to me what Title 39 jurisdiction is?
Mr. Title 39 is sitting right here.
Title 39 is the state code that gives us the authority to enforce motor vehicle laws. It's the motor vehicle chapter of the state that all the state statutes are contained in, and in agreements such as this, it gives authority to the locality police department to enforce those laws that are enforced on public roadways on this type of property.
And we do it in some other places, right? The shopping center, and I forget where else.
Washington Oaks. Washington Oaks.
Washington Oaks. And
Yeah,
I think parts of Griggs Farm as well, but
Yeah.
the shopping center is probably the best
example.
These agreements are common statewide for the most part. I think they're not.
Yeah, I think it's and there's specific provision in the motor vehicle laws for this, and it's in recognition that there are lots of privately owned spaces that are really public in nature because of and shopping centers are probably the best example of that. I mean, not just our shopping center, but malls, areas like that.
I should point out, though, that this is unique in that this is the only such facility in town where there are parking meters.
Yes,
The
that's
others-
correct.
The others, there are no parking meters, so that
Yes.
here, most offenses are going to be parking time violations, and
That's correct. And
unlike the other places.
the meters presented their own set of challenges in putting this together.
Right. I think in previous conversations, one of the reasons why council was interested in continuing to do the enforcement was because the revenue generated from that was not insignificant. So we would have, if we were going to cut off that stream of revenue, we would have had to look at other places in order to make it up. It was not a trivial amount.
Right, I believe it was
What-
about
what-
30,000 a
Correct.
year.
Now, one thing I do want to point out is that under the statute, and it's also restated in the ordinance, either side can cancel the arrangement. So, if it turns out that for the municipality, it's costing more in terms of expenditure of resources than you're bringing in, if it's just no longer worthwhile, you do have the ability to rescind this ordinance and cease enforcement in the parking lot.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing on this? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any more discussion, or is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion?
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Krumiller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes by a vote of 3 to 1. Next, we come to ordinance 2017-21, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating and establishing parking fees for the use of parking spaces at the Spring Street Municipal Parking Garage for charging of electric vehicles, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And I'd like to start by seeing if there's any questions from council before we open up the public hearing. Ms.
Well,
Krummeller?
I just want to tell the rest of the council members that the Public Works Committee looked at we endorsed these rates, and Sustainable Princeton, and I believe some of our staff, I'm not sure, they went out and looked at other charging stations and also figured out, what they thought the best fee should be for these. So they're not just arbitrarily done. They also encourage turnover, which was important for us. And do you have more to add?
No, I think you summarized the discussion at Public Works accurately.
Okay. So I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance.
Hi, I'm Dunbar Burney. I live over on Laurel Road. I'm actually a professor at Rutgers, and I work on electric vehicles, and I study a set of electric vehicle stations on the Rutgers campus. And so we've been measuring energy usage and turnover rates and that sort of thing for our campus location. And so I was reading the rate structure that you've developed here, and it seems like there's already a fee for entering the garage and parking for a period of time, which is a sensible routine. But having the additional charge is going to be a disincentive to having electric vehicle users park at all. And so at Rutgers, I operate a network of EV users where we have a listserv, and vehicles do fill up quicker than a normal workday, and so people move their vehicles, and we get a lot of usage out of the spots. So that's not the scenario you would want to have here, but I think the rate structure you've developed is going to make it so that those spaces will be empty, and you're going to lose the basic parking fee. And I understand, and I've learned just now, that Sustainable Princeton and other groups have put in some input and tried to benchmark the rates against other places. I would question whether they've also benchmarked the usage of those at the higher rates, because at least on the Rutgers campus, if we had a fee that was as large as what you're suggesting, we would have the electric vehicles come to campus but choose not to plug in. And so the other part of the scenario is when you have a big parking garage and then you allocate a few spaces that are EV only, you might think that that would be cutting into the regular parking revenue for cars that would not plug in. But the only time that those spaces cut into the regular parking revenue is when the garage is completely full. And so most of the time those EV-only spaces are not generating revenue unless you're attracting users who will want to park there and pay the regular rate. So my recommendation would be to have the parking fee for those spaces be identical, and the electricity be provided free. This is what we're doing at Rutgers. And I think that if you were to add up, I did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation for some kind of average usage rate, and the revenue that you would get by having added users would far exceed the costs of having electricity and equipment installation over a period of time. So I think it's worth a relook. I know you want to vote on it tonight. I just learned about this today, so I've written up some things here. I'll pass these out, and maybe I could answer.
So thank you. It seems like it seems like that's valuable information that you have. Just a question, are the spots at Rutgers in the garage, are they otherwise free spots? Do people have to pay for the parking that you're talking about?
Right. So generally, parking is a problem everywhere. There are different fee structures for faculty and students, but we pay a permit on an annual basis. Presently, there's no surcharge for a specialty kind of a tag that would be EV users. There's also no enforcement. We have signs that are kind of namby-pamby preferred for EV, and so there's quite a bit of consternation when other vehicles park in the way. So I do hope to move Rutgers to a position where there would be enforcement, but also I want to encourage usage, so I don't want to add surcharges, at least for the Rutgers campus. I think in a parking garage, you're essentially splitting the spaces into two populations. One is the regular, actually any car can park in a regular space. An EV user can come in and choose not to plug in and pay the regular rate. And when you've allocated some spaces to be EV only, then you have to think of the population of EV users and how to attract them in to pay even the regular rate. So I think your revenue could go up by adding more EV and pulling in those users.
So this is my last question, because I just want to take advantage of you being here, because I also have to admit that I thought, well, EV cars are really expensive. And so are these EV users actually price conscious like that? Like it's like $5 or something. It's not very much.
The EV users are electricity availability conscious and price conscious both. There are users on campus. I know you probably know Rutgers is a very complicated multi-campus location. We don't have very many spots, and there are some users who will park on one part of campus and then take the bus system to get to where their regular office job is.
But that's not because of price, right?
That's not because of price. That's because of vigor, enthusiasm. I don't know what the price point is where you would start to discourage users. But to the extent that you could encourage them, then you could add revenue for all of the usage of all those spaces at the regular parking rate, which would really be thousands of dollars a year.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public comment for this ordinance? Mr. Cowan?
I just want to address Jenny's comment about price consciousness of EV users, because actually with the federal tax rebates that are available now, these are not expensive cars. We just got a new Leaf, and the sticker price was about $35,000, but the actual price was about $23,000. So there could be, that's pretty good for a new car. And there could be price-sensitive people who are buying those cars.
Thanks,
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing on this ordinance and bring it back. One suggestion I might have is that whatever we decide to do, we track it and have a report back in 6 months. I don't know how challenging that would be to do if there's already anything built in to those spaces where we could see what the usage is. So we'd have a sense of.
What I could do, I can check with staff. I'm not sure and see what we can come up with in terms of a report back to council on usage.
My guess is that that the charging stations keep all the data, because can you reserve them?
How is the payment made on the charging
don't-
stations?
I'm not very familiar with
Yeah.
them.
Well, we can see how much money is collected through them, I assume.
Yeah.
So
Maybe Dawn, I know.
I haven't ever used those stations, but I think they're Coulomb Technologies brand, and they would be logging the data, and you would usually have an ID card that you swipe and it authenticates you. But then that also could be built into the billing structure. I don't know really what you do currently.
We can find out.
Yeah, I think if we could figure out before they get installed how we could track usage and then have a report back in November, just so we see, and maybe we want to reevaluate at that point, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that I think Public Works and Sustainable Princeton, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, looked at this not so much for residential use as for people coming into town and visiting and parking in the garage, where the garage attendants already report that people ask them on a regular basis, because somewhere out there on the internet, it does say that that has a charging facility.
Well, what happened before, there was a hot charging facility where we had folks who were creative and plugging into the wall socket.
Oh.
That socket has now been covered up, but now you can do it legitimately once these get installed.
Since we're talking about EV charging, there are now EV charging stations at the Princeton Shopping Center as well. And just an anecdotal observation, they don't seem to be occupied very often.
I don't think they're operational, actually. I think there was some conversation on Access Princeton about they're waiting for a final inspection or something. I saw some chatter there last week. So I think the reason why the spaces are empty is because they haven't flipped the switch yet. I believe, according to what I saw on Access Princeton.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion for this ordinance?
So moved.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Crumiller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Okay, and the ordinance is passed unanimously, and hopefully we'll get a report back in about 6 months as to what the usage has been. Next is ordinance 2017-22, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating speed limits on Hutchinson Drive and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing? Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance.
Hi, I'm Mara Olmsted, a longtime resident of Washington Oaks, about 25 years. I've always thought that the speed limit was way too high on Washington Oaks Hutchinson because it's a very curvy road, and it's kind of a blind curve, and right in the middle there's a crosswalk. And the crosswalk is used by kids with bikes, parents with strollers going to use the park, which is on the other side, the playground. And, when you go tearing around the corner, even 30 miles an hour is a lot, honestly. It's amazing that we haven't had any major calamities that I know of to date. Now with the detour coming, when all 206 traffic will be going through, people like me who are familiar with it know that you really shouldn't be going 35 or even 30 there. But we have people who don't know it, so it's just an invitation for disaster in my view. So I figured this was, the time is ripe to take a look at the speed limit there. I don't know what your discretion is and how low you can take it. Ideally, I think 25 would be great because we all know that if it's 25, people will actually go 30, which to me is as high as you should be going there. So my own opinion is 25 would be great, but I'll take what I can get, and I appreciate you looking at it.
Thank you. Ms.
Maybe
Carmella?
we could, oh, sorry. Oh, I thought you said Mr. Miller. Maybe that's a place to look at better sign. I don't know what the signage is at the crosswalk. Is there adequate signage at the crosswalk? And
Sergeant Murray is looking at all of the signage out there. We've also done, we've reached out to the residents on the corner, I forget the address, maybe 19 Brick House, that had quite a bit of vegetation that was blocking the sight line. And so that has been cut back basically to the right-of-way line. So there have been some improvements made, and we will be continuing to look at it up to the detour and during the detour situation, and making adjustments as we need to.
Would that be a site for one of those your speed signs while the detour is in, to sort of reinforce that you're supposed to be going 30? Because my experience observing those while walking my dog in my neighborhood is that they are effective in getting people to hit the brakes when they realize that they're going too fast. So
Yes.
The police have indicated that they will have that sign out during the detour. They had it out during the short-term detour last summer as well.
Just with the curve in the road, you don't know that there's a crosswalk until you're pretty much on it. So one with a stroller who's trying to cross or a kid on a bike really has to wait and be sure that no one is coming because it's not safe.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of this public hearing? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Any further discussion, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll move it.
Second. Oh.
Moved
my
by
brain.
Ms. Crumiller, and we'll give the second to Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next is 2017-23, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating speed limits on the Great Road and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Any questions from council? Like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Crumiller. All in favor? Or, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-24, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing a 3-hour metered parking zone on the east side of University Place between College Road and the Berlin Crosswalk and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing? Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance.
Hi, good evening. My name is, sorry, this feels very close, but you can hear me? Great. My name is Mindy Richardson. I'm the general manager at McCarter. First and foremost, thank you for your thoughtful consideration of these issues. We really recognize that it's impossible to make everyone happy with a change to parking regulations, and we appreciate the opportunity to give a little bit of feedback. We acknowledge that it's necessary to establish the short-term parking on University Place, and we also appreciate the council's decision to make it a 3-hour limit, which will alleviate the time limit concerns for many of our performances. However, we would strongly prefer for the short-term spaces to be south of the Berlin Crosswalk. Designating the 26 spaces as short-term spaces would put them closer to the bar and restaurant, and we believe it would cut down on confusion over which spaces are short-term and which are long-term. The current ordinance places short-term parking spots directly across the street from the long-term spaces, and these spaces look exactly alike. They're all head-in parking at individual meters, whereas the spaces south of the crosswalk are all parallel parking where you pay at the multi-pay or multi-space pay station. For me as a member of the community, or if I was a visitor to the area, the obvious visual differences between the spaces north of the crosswalk and south of the crosswalk would be a key indicator in recognizing that there might be a difference in those regulations. Additionally, the short-term spaces will have a much higher rate than the long-term spaces. They'll be $1.25 per hour versus 30 cents per hour. I imagine that somebody who's visiting those bars or restaurants would really appreciate the ability to pay with a credit card at a pay station rather than dig up $2 or $3 in quarters. We believe that the McCarter patrons receive greater benefit from long-term meter spaces north of the crosswalk, especially for our matinee performances. These spaces, while obviously not enough for all of our patrons, are closer to the entrance to the Matthews Theater, which you know is our venue with the highest capacity and therefore the highest demand for parking. For patrons with accessibility needs, the shorter distance is quite significant. The experience our patrons have while parking is the impression they walk into our theater with. While no solution will ever be perfect, I would ask you to reconsider the location of the short-term parking spaces on University Place in the interest of making it as clear and convenient as possible. One final thing, I would love to make a request about the timing of the ordinance. Please consider tying implementation of this ordinance to the date when all or at least most of the parallel parking spaces on University Place come online. Currently, about a dozen spaces are still offline for the Lewis Center construction. And for those of us who work in the area, parking would be very difficult if suddenly 26 spaces are designated for short-term parking before the full number of parking spaces has been made available. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Can we unpack a little bit what was just raised by the last? Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing for this ordinance? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And can you talk, Deanna, about when the rest of the spaces are going to come online and what the timing is?
What we understand from the university is the remainder of the parking spaces will come online, and maybe Kristen can also correct me, she's here, I think in August, because they are looking at doing the resurfacing of the road late July into August, and I think at that point, all of the spaces would then become online because they would close off their construction access into the site. The entire site would be done, and then they would do the road work.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from?
Well, I have a comment.
Yeah, Mr. Liberman?
Yeah, I have a comment. It's funny, we go to McCarter, my lovely wife and I, to see the performances. And yesterday we went to see Intimate Apparel, and we drove, and I don't even realize that there's parking. I drive by the parking spots to get to the university's garage, and then I walk to McCarter Theater. So it would be nice to, maybe to have a spot where you could park for 3 hours and maybe see a play or a nice performance. So I support this, and wherever, engineering and everyone works out where the meter should be would be fine.
Well, we did already. That's in the ordinance.
I know. No.
I mean, I feel like we should, I mean, if we are going to revisit it, I would want to look at a map and, think about, I don't know if, and I know that Joe also had an opinion on this, so I would say that we either do the plan that we proposed or table it and look at it again.
As I recall, a lot of the discussion about the 3-hour was how long it would take a large party to have a dinner at one of the 2 restaurants there, and I think that sort of informed our thinking about these spaces. Not so much how long it would take you to attend an event at McCarter, where I would park in West Garage like Mr. Liverman and his lovely wife.
I think part of the issue, and I think part of what we just heard, is that the 3-hour spaces were intended to provide some more turnover for the new restaurants there, but the spaces aren't in front of the restaurants, because the thought from some council members was that we wanted to reserve those spots for riders of the Dinky that still liked to park in that location and didn't want to park in the Dinky parking lot. And so I'm just repeating what was discussed before, because I understand where that decision might not make sense if you're looking at the map. So that is because those spaces are both closest to the restaurants. They're in front of the restaurant, but they're also, if you wanted to park in your old location and avoid the traffic, having to go through that traffic light, it would also be closest to the Dinky station. And so that was what the thinking was. I guess
another consideration is that the parallel parking spots on a curve, that's a difficult parking maneuver. So it seemed like it might be better to have parking on a curve allocated to longer term.
I guess Deanna, is the parking study, are they looking at this area, or is this outside of the parking scope of work?
This is part of the scope of study. It extends all the way down to the southern end of the Dinky parking lot. basically Skillman's Furniture is the end of it with Alexander and the parking lot.
And the meters that would be changed as part of this are the smart meters or the old meters?
They would be the old single-space meters, would be changed they would be the 3-hour meters.
And so is that, what's involved with that? Is that getting a whole new meter head for that, or is it
No.
just reprogramming it?
Reprogramming it and putting new stickers on
Okay,
and changing signage wherever the 3-hour parking ends up.
all right. Are
I mean,
there
maybe
any
we
other-
should wait, table it. I mean, I don't know if is there an urgent need for this right now? Are we hearing that from the
We heard it,
restaurant?
yes, we heard it, and we initially did not create the short-term parking, again, because we wanted to make sure that those spaces were available for commuters. And I think with the second restaurant opening, it just feels like, I hate to keep changing stuff around, but if we were to go forward with this, and again, if we're having the parking consultants, I don't know if by the time we make this change, they'll still be looking at it or not. But it feels like, we can at least put some short-term parking in there and then revisit if we need to revisit if it's not working out or people are getting confused by it. And to, put some timeline on it where we come back and take a look, or the natural time to look at it would be when the parking study comes back, if there's a more sensible way to,
Well, we had put in the ordinance, it won't go into effect until June 12th. And as I mentioned previously, the next parking meeting is June 14th. So, there could be the opportunity that you table it and see what information comes out of that meeting. The restaurant, I understand, will be opening in July. So that would be the next deadline time as to when we would want to act on a 3-hour parking zone.
We're trying to determine whether it makes sense to hold the public hearing or table it.
okay. Well, we've already opened the public hearing,
Yeah,
and I think I closed it.
It's difficult
but I
to
could reopen it.
table the ordinance because then it basically dies at that point, because what would cause you to bring it back up again? And if you're keeping the public hearing open, you have to carry it to a date certain.
Right.
You
Well, and if
can't-
we change it, it has to be a new ordinance.
And that has to be a new ordinance.
So we might as well vote up and down on it, right? Is that
I
what
think
you're
that
saying?
would be better.
Or we could keep the public hearing open.
Yes, as long as you reschedule it to a date certain. You can't just have it
Right.
indefinite.
Right, okay.
Okay.
If you wanted to carry it to a specific date in order to study these issues and then determine whether you want to make changes or not, that you could definitely do.
Okay. Sorry to keep putting you on the spot, Deanna, but what information do you think we'll get back from the parking study, and at what time? And would it be more helpful to have the short-term parking in there for them to look at, or to keep the status quo with all of the long-term parking?
They won't be doing any more field evaluation of parking utilization as part of the study. They're currently working on utilization maps of all of the individual streets and parking lots and garages, so they can provide us over a range of times and on a weekday and a weekend of what the real usage is, to see if there's anywhere that's less parked versus more parked. There's also the whole changing dynamic of the additional spots coming online when Arts and Transit is finished. So it's data that exists at this point, but it's also variable based on the changing conditions out there.
I think one of the big questions is will we get any information about who's parking in those parallel spots, and if the feeling is that it's important to protect those parking spots for dinky riders, it could be that there's one dinky rider who parks there, or it could be that on most days there's 0 dinky riders who park there, in which case it might make sense to have the restaurant parking there. So will we get any information about that, or it'll just...
Well, we won't know that until the walkway is open. Is the walkway open yet? I don't think it is, because I think there's going to be a beautiful walkway that's from the old Dinky station to the new Dinky station. And so that's where I think, I know I was one of the, I want to see how long it takes, but might be one of the people who is talking about parking there because it saves a lot of time to park. It might save time to park there, but it might not. It's all a matter of how long it takes to walk down that walkway compared to how long it takes to park in the others, go around the corner, or park in this Dinky station, walk from your spot to the back up to the station.
I know at one point, Ms. Butler had asked if there was the opportunity to do some sort of a simple survey of the people parking down there to understand where they were coming from and where their destination is, to get a better sense of the usage of the parking down in that area. We do have a summer intern that just started today, so if there is a sense that information would be helpful, we could draft up a survey and see what data we could get. We have incidental information that have come from the parking enforcement officers about just overall usage, but we don't have the hard data as to where they're coming from and going to.
Yeah. One issue I see is that I've been in that area to go to the restaurant, and sometimes the parking is extremely tight. And if there are commuters parking there, that's the other question. It's like, should we be encouraging them to park in the lot where there's plenty of spaces and to free up that area so that we can make sure we have healthy businesses?
It's a public policy decision about whether we prioritize, a restaurant or a commuter. So
well, it's not necessarily prioritizing, it's just making sure everybody has a space.
Well, if it is more convenient, you're taking away a little convenience from the commuter. That's why
So, but we don't have any data. When I first was looking at parking, I couldn't imagine why anyone would want to park on the street and walk to the Dinky other than nostalgia, because it's what they've always done, when there's capacity in the Dinky parking lot, which is closer to where you would get the train. But I was corrected on that by some people who said that it's actually a shorter walk from there. But
I don't really know if it is for sure, but.
Okay. Well, the parking lot is large, so I've had to run across the parking lot on several occasions. Okay. Well, is there somebody who'd like to make a motion, or is there the feeling that we'd rather extend the public hearing on this?
Well, the only problem I have is if we extend the public hearing, what new information are we going to receive? I don't know. It's
Deanna's intern.
Like I said, we could do the basic survey of the people parking there, and we will have the utilization information from the consultant that may speak to some of these issues. It may show that, it's not utilized as much as people perceive it is. It could show that, with certain modifications, that other spaces may be more appropriate. And they may talk too about pricing of off-street versus on-street to incentivize people to park in the correct locations based on what their usage is to ensure that we're getting turnover.
So what date do you think we'll have that done by, Deanna? Like July, end of July, or what?
They'll be here on June 14th to give a formal presentation of the data that they've gathered and to give some big overall recommendations of ideas that could possibly be implemented.
And when do you think your intern will be done with collecting that, his or her information?
I think it's a matter of crafting the questions and putting the information out. Our next meeting is the 12th, correct?
Correct.
So we won't have the public meeting on parking until after that meeting. So if you were to table it, I would look to the second meeting in
21st or
in
22nd?
June.
It's 12 plus 14 is 26.
26? If you wanted to table until then.
Yeah, all right. Well, why don't we table it to...
Continue the public
Well, we're
hearing.
going to keep the public hearing open and resume the public hearing at the meeting of June 26th. We don't need to vote on that, do we? I just announced that?
Yes, I think it's fine just to announce it.
Okay. So we'll resume the public hearing on this ordinance on June 26th, and it'd be helpful, I think, if we ask the consultants if they have any specific feedback on this area in terms of what they've seen so far, and make sure they understand the competing needs there. That would be helpful. Okay. All right. Thank you. To be continued. Next is ordinance 2017-25, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton extending the no parking zone on the east side of Alexander Street, north of Faculty Road, and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Any questions from council on this ordinance? All right, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Quinn. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next, we come to ordinance introductions. First ordinance tonight is 2017-31, an ordinance appropriating $982,000 from the sewer connection fees for various improvements in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey. Mr. DeShield, do you want to walk us through? Yeah.
The next couple of bond ordinances. These ordinances represent our 2017 capital plan for this year that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. The capital plan was reviewed both by council.
It's hard to hear. I think you need to get a little closer.
It's been reviewed by council. It's also been reviewed by the finance committee and the Citizens Finance Committee, and it represents the capital spending for all of the departments for each year. The bond ordinances are broken down into several different ones. We're looking at now just the sewer component, and I'm just going to walk through. We have what we call the general capital in a total amount of roughly $6,700,000, and that includes various capital improvements for the fire, public works, in infrastructure, engineering, and library, and there's various improvements there. Then we have the $982,000 worth of improvements for the sewer operating committee. There's various improvements there, and I can go through if we have any questions on each one of those. Of those, we also have improvements that will be funded through just go back for 1 second. I do want to make it clear that the SOC capital improvements are funded directly from the sewer connection fees, and they're paid in cash. We're not taking any debt out for those. Next we have is the New Jersey Environmental Trust Fund projects were roughly $1.5 million. Those projects will be run through, and most of that is the River Road Cold Storage Facility. And then our final projects will be from the capital operating fund. Again, these are funded through the parking utility in total, and that's $115,000. And those will be for bond, the next 1, 2, 3, 4 bond ordinances council will be reviewing.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council on this first ordinance? No. Okay, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is
Second.
there seconded by Mr. Liverman? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to comment? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 The ordinance is introduced, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on June 12, 2017. Next is 2017-32, bond ordinance providing for various improvements in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $1,515,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1,515,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. Any questions from council?
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any comments from the public? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on June 12th, 2017. Next is 2017-33, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the parking utility in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $115,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $115,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. Any
So moved.
questions? Moved by Mr. Liverman. Is there
Second.
seconded by Ms. Krummeller? Any comments from the public? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 12th, 2017.
Mayor, a question for council. Should I recuse from the introduction of the next one since some of these various capital improvements involve the library?
That would probably be the safest. I haven't, reviewed the entirety of the ordinance to see to what extent, but probably safest for you to recuse yourself, given that we do still have a quorum, fortunately.
But does Mr. Miller have to recuse as well?
Oh, for God's sake.
And that means we won't have a quorum in order to vote.
Pull up the ordinance.
Is there a motion just to amend the agenda so we can move on while this is being looked at? So
moved.
Second.
Okay, well, we're going to amend the agenda to put this ordinance introduction as the last ordinance introduction on the list. So it's been moved by Mr. Quinn, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is 2017-35, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the acceptance of a conservation easement for a portion of Block 4301, Lot 3 on the Princeton tax map.
I'll move that.
It's been moved by
Second.
Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Quinn.
I just want to make sure, I did circulate a couple of minor revisions to the ordinance that I hope all of you saw, so if we can let me just place them on the record so that it's clear that what you are moving is the ordinance with the amendments.
Okay,
They're very minor, non-substantive in nature in the ordinance itself. It's just adding in section 1 the words "a portion of" in front of the lot and block number, which is consistent with the title of the ordinance, and then there are a couple of,
You might get closer.
It
You got
is,
closer.
yeah.
You got closer.
and then a couple of
There you
very minor, non-substantive changes to the conservation easement that is attached as an exhibit to the ordinance. So
okay.
assuming that the motion to introduce was with those revisions.
Ms. Krummeller, can you just affirm that? Okay,
Yes, the motion was with the revisions.
And it's seconded.
okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Any comments from the public on this ordinance? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the public hearing, the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 12th, 2017. Next is 2017-36, an ordinance by Princeton accepting the donation of vacant real property located at 224 Cherry Valley Road and designated as Block 601, Lot 2 on the Princeton tax maps.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeler
Second?
and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments on this ordinance? Any comments from the public? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on June 12th, 2017. And wondering if we have any
Looks like
clear
resolution
legal
time.
counsel at this point, or should we keep moving on and then
Well,
come back?
I'm not going to be able to give you an answer tonight. So I would suggest that we just relist that particular ordinance for.
Is that cause a problem to delay? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to call it the wrong way and have two council members recuse themselves unnecessarily, but I also don't want to call it the wrong way and have them vote on something where they should have recused.
I think that as a matter of precedent, I have in the past recused myself from any votes relating to funding of the library.
Yeah, I mean, as Mr. DeShield and I were discussing, for instance, when you vote on your annual budget, there's a line item in the budget on the library, but there's also statutorily, there's a certain amount you must appropriate every year, and I've never felt discomfort. This is a little bit different, so.
Right.
But as I say, I don't want to give the wrong answer by simply guessing tonight. I would rather, if you
Yeah,
could
because-
delay introduction to the 12th, so that I can get you the accurate answer one way or the other.
Okay, I would also recommend too, if it's possible to, if it doesn't add any expense, to split this into two, and so Mr. Quinn and Mr. Miller can vote on the bulk of it, and we'd just be pulling out the library, as long as that doesn't require a separate bond issuance or anything that, right, and that would make it cleaner also. Okay. So if we can, let's put it on for introduction on June 12th, and just, if you can just count noses, making sure that if Mr. Quinn and Mr. Miller are recusing, that we still have enough other council members at that meeting. I think we will, but if you could just double check on that. No, it's on the phone. Yeah, okay, so next is the resolution 17162, resolution amending professional services agreements with Jeffrey R. Serenian and Associates LLC, the Buzak Loft Group LLC, and eConsult Solutions Incorporated, Nassau Capital Advisors, to represent the Mercer County Municipal Group in the trial on the fair share methodological issues.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeler.
I'll second,
And
only if
second.
the mayor can say that word backwards. All right, I'll
I
second
might
it.
have to withdraw that second. Seconded by Mr. Liverman. And I did have some questions for Mr. DeShield that I shared with him that I don't think there's an issue with the resolution, but when we come to the bills list, I'm going to ask to hold payment until we have some questions answered. But for this resolution, I think it's just providing for the fact that the trial has gone on for longer than we initially expected. So this has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 17163, resolution authorizing the purchase of a 2017 Ford Explorer for the Department of Emergency and Safety Services for $26,951. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Krummeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And Next, we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. I would just like to make that formal statement that for the bills list, I would ask that we hold the payments in relation to the COA trial until some of those issues are worked out.
Yeah, I'd just like the legal committee to look them over.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda in block.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Liverman. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kremler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I think everybody just moved that. But I think moved by Ms. Kremler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.